It appears that America has just won the first battle in the new global tariff war of Trump's second administration. Early in the morning hours of Friday, January 24th, the White House posted a photo on their official Facebook page. You can see it up on your screen here. The photo shows illegal migrants shackled at the hands and feet getting loaded onto a military jumbo jet in order to get deported back to their country of origin. Reportedly, that first batch of migrants was sent back to Guatemala. However, not all Latin American countries are accepting these deportations as the new normal. For instance, just 2 days after the photo was posted and after the U.S. began their deportation flights, an international spat was kicked off between the United States and Colombia, of all places. You see, on Sunday afternoon at around 1:30 p.m., President Trump released the following statement on his social media platform, Truth Social. Quote, "I was just informed that 2 repatriation flights from the United States with a large number of illegal criminals were not allowed to land in Colombia. This order was given by Colombia's socialist president, Gustavo Petro, who is already very unpopular amongst his people. Petro's denial of these flights has jeopardized the national security and public safety of the United States, so I have directed my administration to immediately take the following and urgent, decisive retaliatory measures." And then, right below that message, President Trump listed out 5 punitive actions that were about to hit the Colombian economy if they did not immediately accept the repatriation flights. They are as follows. Quote, "An immediate 25% tariff on all goods coming into the United States from Colombia, and if they did not comply within 1 week, the 25% tariff would become a 50% tariff. A full-scale travel ban, including the immediate revocation of all visas given to Colombian government officials, as well as all allies and supporters of the current Colombian government," which is, by the way, a very broad designation, and it could easily include officials from other countries as well if those people happen to be friendly with the current Colombian government. It goes on. "Visa sanctions on all party members, family members, and supporters of the Colombian government. Enhanced customs and border protection inspections of all Colombian nationals and cargo on national security grounds." And just to pause here for a super quick moment, I had to stop and look up what Colombian exports to the U.S. actually entail, and they are predominantly fossil fuels, trees, pearls, precious metals, coffee beans, aluminum, and then not mentioned on the official export list, very likely a vast amount of cocaine. Now, to the U.S., besides the cocaine, Colombian imports represent a relatively small amount of trade. From our perspective, if you look at what the U.S. imports in a given year and rank it by country, Colombia is all the way down at number 25. However, from the other side of the coin, from the Colombian perspective, this was a disastrous turn of events, since for Colombia, the U.S. is their biggest export destination by far, accounting for roughly 30% of all exports in 2023. Having both tariffs as well as inspections on all those goods would be an economic disaster for that country. But then it got even worse when Trump mentioned the 5th punitive measure that he was about to take. Quote, "IEEPA, Treasury, banking, and financial sanctions to be fully imposed." And just for your reference, the IEEPA stands for the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. It's the law which allows the sitting U.S. president to be able to regulate international trade after he declares a national emergency, which is exactly what Trump has done in regards to the migrant crisis. And so these were the 5 economy-crushing actions that Trump was floating. Although floating is not the right word, since it's what he was actually doing. Essentially, within the span of just a few hours, the Colombian president decided to deny the landing of 2 U.S. military aircrafts, and therefore the country was slapped with tariffs on all their exports, no more U.S. visas, a travel ban, sanctions, more inspections of their exported goods, and on top of all that, Trump ended a statement by saying that these punitive measures were just the beginning. Quote, "These measures are just the beginning. We will not allow the Colombian government to violate its legal obligations with regard to the acceptance and return of the criminals they forced into the United States." Now, being verbally slapped around like this by the newly elected president of the most powerful country on earth had to sting, especially since it was done in public rather than in private. And as such, this set off a chain reaction from Mr. Gustavo Petro, the president of Colombia. Immediately after Trump's statement came out, Mr. Petro responded with his own public message, which said the following, quote, The U.S. cannot treat Colombian migrants as criminals. I deny the entry of American planes carrying Colombian migrants into our territory. The United States must establish a protocol for the dignified treatment of migrants before we receive them. Now, you can make the argument here that objectively, this is a reasonable response. Asking for a protocol to be put into place isn't crazy. Now, of course, from the American side, you can argue that these are illegal migrants in our country, and therefore treating them like criminals in the deportation process isn't unreasonable either. But regardless, there's an argument to be had here. However, President Petro's first statement was soon followed up with a very, very long post from him that reads something like a diatribe against Trump, against America, against white expansionism, and against capitalism in general. The whole thing is quite long, but I'll read to you a small snippet of it just so you can get a feeling for the tone that Colombia's president was trying to get across. Quote, Trump, I don't really like traveling to the US. It's a bit boring, but I confess that there are some commendable things. I like going to the black neighborhoods of Washington, where I saw an entire fight in the US Capitol between blacks and Latinos with barricades, which seemed like nonsense to me because they should join together. Now, just to pause here for a moment, I don't actually understand what he's referring to here. At first, when he referenced Washington, I assumed it was January 6th, but then it doesn't really make sense. If you know what he's referring to here, please leave it in the comment section below. I'm sure both myself and many people watching this would appreciate. Regardless, though, the message continues. Quote, I don't like your oil, Trump. It's going to wipe out the human species because of greed. Maybe one day, with a glass of whiskey that I accept, despite my gastritis, we can talk frankly about this. But it's difficult because you consider me part of an inferior race, and I'm not, nor is any Colombian. So if you know someone who is stubborn, that's me, period. You can't try to carry out a coup with your economic strength and your arrogance. But I will die true to my principles. I resist the torture, and I resist you. I don't want slavers next in Colombia. We already had many, and we freed ourselves. What I want next in Colombia are lovers of freedom. If you can't join me, I'll go elsewhere. You will kill me, but I will survive in my people, which lives before yours in the Americas. We are peoples of the winds, the mountains, the Caribbean Sea, and of freedom. Now, I will mention that the original was written in Spanish, so I did just hit the translate button on Twitter, and so that's what it came back with. Regardless, though, the letter goes on like that for a while, making many more of these types of statements and claims against both Trump and America in a sort of ideological context. However, in a practical sense, the statement ended with the following, quote, I'm informed that you impose a 50% tariff on the fruits of our human labor to enter the United States, and I do the same. Meaning that as a response to our retaliatory action, the Colombian president initiated his own retaliatory action of a 50% tariff. However, that was basically an empty threat. Imposing 50% sanctions on U.S. exports wouldn't really affect America much at all. We literally, as a country, export more to the city of Hong Kong compared to the country of Colombia. And so imposing 50% tariffs on U.S. exports would likely hurt Colombia more than it would hurt the U.S. And indeed, despite this response letter having the posture of not bending the knee to the U.S. and its might, within less than a day, Colombia's knee was bent. By the end of the day, Sunday, the White House press secretary sent out a statement saying that the Colombian government had capitulated. Here's specifically what Ms. Caroline Leavitt, the new White House press secretary, wrote in this particular statement. Quote, the government of Colombia has agreed to all of President Trump's terms, including the unrestricted acceptance of all illegal aliens from Colombia returned from the United States, including on U.S. military aircraft, without limitation or delay. Based on this agreement, the fully drafted IEEPA tariffs and sanctions will be held in reserve and not signed unless Colombia fails to honor this agreement. The visa sanctions issued by the State Department and enhanced inspections from Customs and Border Protection will remain in effect until the first plane load of Colombian deportees is successfully returned. And then on his end, the Colombian president released his own statement, which was his third statement, saying that he will be mobilizing his official presidential airplane to fly the Colombian deportees back into the country to help preserve their dignity, which is obviously a nice gesture, although it does make you wonder whether he'll be able to continue to use the presidential airplane when thousands or even tens or hundreds of thousands of more illegal migrants are sent back to the country. And along that exact line, by Tuesday, U.S. military flights had resumed going back and forth to Colombia. Quote, 2 Colombian Air Force planes carrying more than 200 illegal immigrants who were expelled from the United States landed at Bogota's International Airport on Tuesday. One plane, which was flying from San Diego, sent home 110 Colombians, and the other plane, which left from El Paso, brought home 91. And so that is how the situation played itself out. The first battle in the new international tariff war had America come out victorious. If you'd like to go through the details of anything that we discussed in today's episode in regards to the Colombia-US battle, I'll throw the links to all my research notes down into the description box below, which I'll mention is that same description box right below those like and subscribe buttons, both of which I hope you take a quick moment to smash. And then lastly, with the dizzying amount of new developments coming out of the Trump administration, I would highly recommend that you consider subscribing to the Epoch Times. It's a newspaper that was born 25 years ago in order to expose communist China, but is now one of the largest and, in my opinion, one of the best news sources in America. And so, as ICE is rounding up thousands of illegal migrants across the country, as Trump is pumping out dozens of executive orders, as he's invoking laws all the way back from 1798, as DEI offices are getting shuttered left and right, as the Chinese military is claiming to be testing space, microwave, laser beam weapons, as classical education and homeschooling are resurging, as populist movements across the entire globe are experiencing something like a renaissance, well, as all that is happening, the mainstream media cannot honestly cover it that well. Their mental model is outdated, their framework in terms of their worldview is obsolete, and that's why they can't keep up with the developments, and they can't just report on things honestly. If they did, it might create something like a seg fault in their minds. And so, as the world is changing, I really do hope that you subscribe to the Epoch Times. It's a great source of news, and I publish exclusive Facts Matter content on there that you can't find on YouTube. Usually because I'm worried about certain topics getting censored or even having our channel get a strike if I were to publish that content on YouTube. And the next big thing that I'm working on to be published exclusively over on the Epoch Times website is going to be a multi-part series exposing government plots that are irrefutable because the underlying documents have already been declassified. The first installment of that series is going to be about Operation Northwoods. Up on your screen right now is a declassified document that came out of the CIA showing how back in the 1960s, the US military was planning to commit acts of terrorism against American citizens so that they could blame that terrorism on the Cubans in order to justify a kinetic war. The document reveals that the Joint Chiefs of Staff were in on it, and the only thing that stopped it from happening was the fact that JFK would not go along with the plan. And so, because Trump is about to release the remainder of the JFK assassination files, I think it's a perfect first episode to do in the series, in anticipation of whatever's about to be released in those docs. And so, this is all to say that if you appreciate solid content like this, that actually treats you like an intelligent person capable of making decisions for yourself, well, subscribe to the Epoch Times. I'll throw a link down into the description box below. Just click on that link and you can join the literally over 1 million Americans who've subscribed to the Epoch Times already. And the community over there is great. It's filled with patriotic Americans who love to read and discuss the news in a way that you really can't anywhere else on social media. And so again, the link will be right there below this video. I hope that you click on it, and I hope that you join us over at theepochtimes.com. And then otherwise, until next time, I'm your host, Roman from the Epoch Times. Stay informed, and most importantly, stay free.